lights, swag lamps, pole lamps, bulb shades, and much more, all at builders' prices. They're your total lighting needs experts. And remember, because they buy in volume and sell at builders' wholesale prices, you save money each and every day when you shop at Buy Right Lighting. Check out the everyday savings and selection and come into the nearest Buy Right Lighting showroom today and buy right.
We're coming through for you.
Good morning. Premier Bennett of our social credit government will not be too happy this morning because the extreme left did not take over the BC Federation of Labour. That would have given a good confrontational scene to pick up and run with. But did the extreme right wing? Well, it was a dog's breakfast, to be quite honest. And the man who was hurt the most was Jack Munro of the IWA, who had to swallow his pride after his candidate Langan collapsed, and he had to go back and take his troops in to vote for Kube, the man he didn't want. And of course Webster had a nag for Munro as the Kube victory was announced, and it went something like this. Now, are you going to kiss and make up? Does Kube have your full confidence now?
Don't run around and kiss men, particularly, Jack. So, no, I'm not going to kiss anybody.
Munro's got another tough one today. If he loses his position as first vice pres of the Fed, he may pick up his marbles and, while not walking away, go into a huff in a corner. We're going to meet Kube this morning in his post-victory state of mind. Now, today, believe it or not, we've got a member of BC's socialist group on the air. You don't often see them nowadays. They seem to have vanished into the wilderness of politics. And it is Mark Rose, the NDP MP for Fraser Valley?
No, Coquitlam Moody.
For Coquitlam Moody. And he's going to respond to the appearance yesterday of the ineffable Heinrich, the Minister of Education, who presented us with that gooey white paper, and who I'm sure that Rosie's target will be on the abhorrent, to him anyway, cutbacks in education. Then, as a matter of conscience, we're going to look at some bigwigs who are in town for a conference on traffic safety. And we're going to talk to Dr. Patricia Waller of North Carolina, a highway safety expert. We're going to talk to Dr. Herb Simpson from the Far East, Ottawa that is, who's an expert in traffic injury research. And we're going to talk to Dr. Kimball Maull, one of these trauma accident medical experts from Tennessee, if you please. We're going to have a look, too, at a fantastic day in the life of Canada, which is a book, B-O-O-K. And then, very special this morning, do you remember this couple, Murray and Shirley Siddon of Burnaby, who were in an accident with an RCMP officer at Burris and Canada Way? And of course they were told that they were to blame. If a Mountie hits anybody, the person who is hit is to blame. And I have pledged to do a weekly report to see if we can get the Mounties to speed up their normal dilatory settlement of claims involving their vehicles. And we're going to find out if it's going to take the average 6 months or a year, or if we've managed to get them off their horse and down to their desk to settle this particular accident claim. But first, after the break, it's Kube. The final bloodletting at the BC Federation of Labour Convention takes place this morning, and it's a question of whose throat gets cut. Jack Munro, as first Vice President, up for re-election of the BC Federation of Labour, a powerful position the IWA has traditionally held. or his enemy, Art Gruntman, who is challenging Munro. And when you look at the big vote that Gruntman's ally, Frank Kennedy, got yesterday, it's not improbable that Gruntman will defeat Munro. That's one thing. And of course, Munro's man Kramer was beaten for Secretary-Treasurer by none other than Cliff Anstine of the BCGEU, which has appeared really as the kingmaker and the new power in the Federation of Labour Convention on the long haul. After Kube won, with Munro's unwilling support, he had to switch after his candidate lost. His candidate came in a rather poor third. I had a little chat with Munro, which went like this. I'm surprised you're smiling. Are you not sorry now that you put up Langan as the third candidate because you did not want Kube as president of the BC Fed?
I'm not sorry, not at all. I think the people who supported Joy ran a good campaign.
That was you. You ran the campaign.
No, I didn't run the campaign. We had 300 and some people who were assisting us in running the campaign. We were above board, above the table. We ran a good campaign. We didn't make it, and then we voted for somebody else.
So therefore it was Hobson's choice. Anybody rather than Frank Kennedy was the motto, was it not?
Well, that's not right. We had a caucus after our candidate was unsuccessful. The majority, not unanimous, but the majority in our caucus voted to support Kube, so I guess that's what the majority voted.
Now, are you going to kiss and make up? Does Kube have your full confidence now?
Don't run around and kiss men, particularly, Jack. So, no, I'm not going to kiss anybody. The trade union movement has been in scraps before. We have the ability to come out of a scrap, unite ourselves, and we don't lose our perspective because we've had a fight.
Well, anyway, it certainly put you down the convention, didn't it, so far?
Well,
the IWA didn't wield total wallop, did it?
Oh, we've got quite a few delegates here, and the convention is not over yet, Jack. And with your assistance, we can rise again to our normal stature.
The loneliness of the long-distance runner was nothing compared to the loneliness of Art Kube. After this, the days of tension and trauma in the BC Federation of Labour Convention, because the odds against Kube being elected a couple of days ago were not good. Have I overstated it when I say that you've been through a period of what you might call utter loneliness in the past few days?
It was very lonesome, Jack.
And how did you feel during that? Do you feel as if you've been stabbed in the back, let down, left to lie there as a kind of symbol of other people's enmity?
Well, in plain folksy English, I felt like the meat in the sandwich.
And you were the meat in the sandwich.
That's right.
Meat in the sandwich between Frank Kennedy and his extreme left-wing group, including Bill Clark of TWU, right?
Well, I'm not so sure that I would define them as extreme left. The left did support Frank, but there were a good number of people who supported Frank who are not left, and who I would consider to be considerably far right.
Now, at the same time, and it's not often one turns to the human side of trade union elections, but your friend Munro had walked away from you and put up a third candidate, and he was vastly disappointed when his third candidate ran behind you in the first vote, was he not?
Well, I'm not so sure he was really disappointed, because it was very apparent that I would be running second. Regardless, that there was never any question about that. But I desperately wanted to win the first ballot victory, and that just wasn't there.
Does that make your position any weaker now?
Well, no, because when I got elected, Jack, by the Executive Council, there was a similar combination opposing me then as supported Frank Kennedy today. And so, the lot of the candidate at the center is that you tend to get pressured by both sides. But if you want to build unity in the trade union movement, you have to stay at the center. You have to stay at the center because you have to be able to work out some accommodations. And, that's where you build strength, is at the center. So it's very lonesome, but the chances of building great unity and success are at the center.
Let me be quite frank about it. You and Munro had your fallings out, and I've held my own little inquests with you and Munro on the air about it. Can you and Munro get together again as the solid centre block in the BC Federation of Labour?
Well, you know, I think that what we're going to have to do, we're going to have to get the BCGU, the IWA, CUPE, Steel, the food unions, you know, that is sort of the center block in trade union movement. But I think that, you know, I will work very hard to establish good relationship with the TWU and, you know, even Fish. And, you know, I got really no hang up about that because, you know, I mean, on trade union issues, you know, on most trade union issues we agree anyway.
Do you think Bennett would have been happier if Kennedy and the boys had won? Hey, that would have made it more of a confrontation than with Kube, wouldn't it?
Well, I'm not so sure because, you know, I mean, you know, the center is always much stronger when it comes to dealing with the government than either of the two fringes.
Just by the way, is this really, how old are you now, Art Kube?
49.
Is this the first time you've actually been elected straight up to an office in the trade union movement?
Well, besides being elected local union officer and so forth.
Right.
But to a full-time position, that is the first time where I faced an election. I ran for public office, was defeated. I ran, as a matter of fact, just in the building next door here in 1974 for the position of Secretary-Treasurer of the CLC. I got defeated. I ran again in 1968, if you recall, as Secretary-Treasurer of the BC Federation of Labour.
You got defeated
by 100 votes. If at first don't succeed, try again. It's really applicable to me.
Have you any words for, what's his name, Bennett in Victoria? Have you any words of praise or comfort or determination or your target when you're dealing with Bennett from here on in as the elected president of the BC Federation of Labour and its economic disaster through which we are now living?
I made a major speech at the opening of the convention where I basically outlined some of the policies we should follow, but I did a very critical examination of the economic policy of the circuit government, and maybe it would pay Mr. Bennett to get a copy of it.
Congratulations, Art Kube,
Thank you.
from most of the delegates here.
Okay.
Next on the convention floor, the battle between Gruntman and Munro. If it happens before 10:30, we'll give you the result. After this, Mark Rose, the NDP Education Critic. Away with the break. Education Minister Jack Heinrich was here yesterday explaining with lucid detail his white paper on what he wants you to tell him about the school system. For instance, should schooling be compulsory? Apart from that, though, and not to give you too obvious an opening, Mark Rose, we still have an NDP party in the province?
Yes, and we're alive and well.
And active?
Well, you see, we don't call the legislature. We're not the government. Now, Mr. Bennett would care to call the legislature. We'd like to do that sort of thing. We'd like to get there because there are lots of problems we could be working on. But
you're saying there should be a session of the legislature this winter?
There should have been one this fall. Of course there should.
To deal with the economic crisis?
Well, I mean, there's, you know, what we've got is economic clownism going on, and it's destroyed our recovery. Restraint has ruined our recovery.
But you must be pleased with Kinsella's revelations. Surely that Mr. Bennett couldn't be taken into Okanagan North because he'd have ruined the plan and ensured defeat.
I think he was very candid. And I think he's right.
Think he'll still have his job?
Oh, I think that he's a consultant and he'll probably find another job.
Education. Your response, please, to the white paper, which is seriously issued for discussion and a report from this Provincial Advisory Committee. Did it make any sense to you?
Two things. It's deliberately vague, as Heinrich was when he was here yesterday, because he won't answer any questions on the grounds that he wants to hear from the people. Now,
if I'd asked him if he wanted kids to read and write, he wouldn't have answered that either.
Well, no, he would have taken the fifth on that one. But,
right.
but I think that we need a study into education, the needs of education, the needs of the community. One thing that bothered me a little bit, though, it doesn't say very much about children. It would be kind of nice to consider your consumers and their parents. The other thing is that I'm not sure that the time allowed is really enough. I mean, 3 months to do a detailed study when BCTF and others have called for a royal commission to come back with recommendations is really not sufficient.
Well, what do you want to bash at in the way of attacking Heinrich this morning? I presume you're not here to praise Heinrich, you're just here to bury him.
I'm here because I wanted people to know that the NDP was still around. You see?
Now,
where were you? Where were you when we really needed you, is what people can say.
What about the cutbacks?
Well, the cutbacks, they say, is 2% per year, but really with inflation, it isn't 6% over 3 years. It's something like 19 or 20. And that's going to devastate the school system. We're one of the lowest per GNP provinces, if not the lowest in Canada. The Canadian average is that we spend 5% of our GNP in various provinces on education. BC spending 3.4. So people haven't begun to realize yet, because you can absorb perhaps a 10% cut. That's your first year. Get rid of the fat, they say. It's called, like you did. Got rid of the fat. But if you do that for 3 years in a row, Burnaby is facing about a 36% cutback, and it's not all due to declining enrollment either.
How much?
About 33 to 36.
33.
Burnaby's the highest of all. They're going to get a cutback over 3 years of 17.8. Now, if you add another 18 for inflation over 3 years, you're looking at 35%.
Well, Heinrich was at least frank enough to admit that, one, they have taken away the local autonomy, they have controlled the budgets, and you can't blame them for that nowadays.
Now, just a moment. Do you excuse somebody because he happens to tell the truth? I mean, the fact is that they have stolen the local tax base and local autonomy. Are we to stand up and cheer? We'll say, well, it's only for 3 years. When Van der Zalm first brought it in, it was only for 1. And the business about having a sunset provision at the end of 3 years is nonsense. The legislature can change that on a moment's notice. Now, I don't think he should be congratulated for that. I think we need to have that local autonomy restored. Otherwise, why bother to have school boards? As it is now, as Coquitlam found to their sorrow, the department escapes the real criticism, and all the flack is aimed at the local boards.
I loved his quote, which I threw at him yesterday, that any noisy school boards would not receive a sympathetic ear from him.
Well, he threatened the school boards. He blackmailed the school boards. He said, in effect, and Coquitlam is a perfect example of this, they did the logical, low-profile thing and tried to advance the arguments, and nothing happened.
Well said,
so
Webster.
They got noisy.
Well said, Webster. What is Ottawa doing with the $27 million in education funds it gets from the federal government?
They are diverting it into general revenue, the same as they diverted $100 million of health funds into general revenue. We have real cutbacks in our college programs. They're canceling programs at, Okanagan College and Douglas College, and the programs have been canceled. And why have they been canceled? Post-secondary education, which partially comes under Heinrich, has been deprived of 27 million federal dollars raise over last year, plus 27 more million dollars that they cut back. So they were lowered by $54 million. That's why they're canceling courses. That's why they've increased fees. That's why they've canceled their student loan access. And that's destroyed access for many people, especially rural kids.
There was a time not so long ago when the teaching profession and the schools and the education community got no sympathy from the public whatsoever, correct?
Right.
Because we were all convinced it was full of fat, that the universities were full of layabouts, and that the schools...
Tenured layabouts.
I forgot the adjective. And that the schools were really a disciplinary disaster, right?
Yeah. Poor standards, rotten discipline, teachers are lazy and greedy. Okay. Private schools are better, and cheaper. They're sure cheaper, because an independent school costs us 30-cent dollars. Where a public school costs us a complete dollar.
Well, now, if the NDP were in power, of course, you would not divert any of these vast federal funds to general revenue, would you?
I think Mulroney will take care of that. He's going to divert a great deal of federal funds coming to the province already. But certainly that the money intended for education should go to education, and the money intended federally for health should go to health. Of course it should.
What's the answer? because this commission's not going to change the facts on the ground or the social credit policies at the moment, is it?
Well,
in any way, shape or form.
The government, and Heinrich particularly, were forced into having public hearings over the new grad requirements. They ran around the province, held a dozen or so meetings, got flack from everywhere.
What? The new what?
Graduation requirements for high schools. And they ran around the province and got flack from everybody, all and sundry, and then produced, after 3 or 4 months, virtually the identical program that they got flack for. So if they're going to do the same thing here, he claims he wants to learn what people are thinking. Well, he'll learn all right, but will he respond to it? I think he's taken orders. Attack education, cut the budget, bring it back, ignore inflation, and I think it's going to have tremendous effect on the school system, and people are going to be aroused. If they're not, they should be.
Mind you, one good juice for the schools now and to keep them in longer is so they don't join the ranks of the unemployed, isn't it?
I'll give you another stat. I know stats are very good, but of the kids that are unemployed, the 23% under 24, 8% of those are unemployed, only 8% if they've had any post-secondary education. And we're cutting the college and university fundings back between 3 and 5%.
Have you anything you want to tell Mark Rose? Because they would be different if they were in power. They would cure the ills overnight.
No, we can't. You can't cure the ills of public education, but what people should remember is that instead of 30 years ago, we're keeping about twice as many kids in schools as we did in those days. And that necessitates a lot of adjustments. You don't just have academically gifted kids. You've got to provide programs for everybody's child. So why should the schools not cater to everybody's child, since everybody pays taxes?
Questions to Mark Rose after the break. Let me ask you a question from the white paper. Should teachers be allowed to strike? Yes or no?
Teachers, anybody, everybody has the right to strike. We don't at the moment in teaching, but you know what happens. You know that in Australia you don't have the right to strike either, and they have more labor disputes down there than they do here.
All I asked you was, should BC teachers have the right to strike, and you gave me a weaselly answer.
No, I didn't. Yes.
Yes, they should have.
They should have a right to collective bargaining, and they haven't got that now.
Should principals be excluded from the BC Teachers Federation? Because it's quite intolerable that principals and the lowliest teacher be in the same union when one is the boss of the other. Should principals be excluded from the BC Teachers Federation?
No.
No?
No. Because there's more to being a principal than merely being a boss of a school. You were a learning leader, you were also a counselor and a confidant and an inspirer, and you are first of all a teacher.
No, but you're one of the upper classes. You should not be in the union.
No, I'm saying that they should be a part of the BCTF.
So if I'm a teacher, I can grieve my principal under the grievance procedure, can't I?
If necessary. You know, teachers don't have many rights. Are you aware of that? That's one of the things.
What?
No, they don't. They don't have any rights on their working conditions. They're not members of they don't come under the labor code. You know, this old business about teachers are the pampered souls. It's a lot of nonsense.
You were one yourself, of course.
Of course I was.
You're in a conflict of interest discussing the very topic.
Yeah.
Should schooling, this is for...
Oh, yeah.
This is
what about the strap? Why don't you ask me about the strap?
Are you prepared to bring back the strap?
The right to strike a child. How do you like that?
You say
bring back the strap, because we should have the right to strike a kid. Is that really what you're saying?
People and kids are not for hitting.
That's right.
Should we start the school day with the Lord's Prayer?
I didn't.
Answer the question, witness. No.
No.
What are you?
I'm on trial. I'm on trial.
Are you anti-Christian?
No, I think a person seeks God in his own way.
Children sometimes have to be led and told to seek God.
By their parents. It's up to the parents, I think, to decide on what values they wish to pass on to their children.
No strap, no Lord's Prayer.
No.
Go ahead, please.
Yes, Mr. Rose, I'd like to ask you, concerning the strap, I just heard it on the phone that you were talking about that, and that's good. I'm just wondering if you feel that since the Socreds are strapping the people of BC in every which way, do you feel that they're going to bring in the strap? And also, how come the NDP aren't doing anything about the way that the Socreds are keeping the legislature closed and not opening it like any decent democracy? And I'll just hang up and let you...
One.
Well, I raised that issue with you this morning. I think the legislature should be open. And as far as the strap is concerned, I don't think they'll bring back the strap.
Where do you think Bennett's hiding?
Oh, I don't know.
That's
How would
the
I
Premier.
know?
Do you remember
Ask
the name?
Kinsella. He's a good friend of Bennett's.
Oh no, they won't be having coffee together
Oh, you
this
don't
week.
think so?
I don't think.
I
no.
see.
I'd love to be there when Kinsella's explaining that gaffe to Bennett. Wouldn't that be smashing?
That'd be lovely, yeah.
Go ahead to Mark Rose.
Hi, Mark. I'm so delighted to hear somebody who has a focus on the child for a change.
Thank you very much.
Also, it really bothers me that it seems that BC is becoming an elitist society where those who have dollars can determine what education levels their kids are going to achieve. So if somebody is socioeconomic bottom of the or middle bottom, can't afford to put their kids in university, can't afford to put their kids in these private schools where the programs are different and there's arts, an emphasis on arts programs which is being diminished in the other areas. It really bothers me that private education looks to be the forecast for this so-called government, so that the problem is, myself, I can't afford that for my children. I live in Coquitlam and I'm devastated with what's going on here.
Good.
Well, so you should be. The big problem with the cutbacks in the public schools, that if you destroy the public schools, those people who can afford it will seek another alternative. And so, therefore, it's just a vicious circle. The schools will get less and less and less support, while the independent schools get larger. We've got to protect and make stronger our public schools.
Go ahead, please.
Good morning. I just wanted to say something in general. I feel never in history we have spent so much money on education and have got so little out of it, because when our children come out of school, they can't even spell. Many times I've heard professors complain when they go to university, they can't even pass the test, spelling tests.
Okay, ma'am, we've got these remedial courses for high school graduates to go to university. Does that matter really nowadays?
I went to university in fall of 41, and I came out of a so-called academic high school, and one of the courses offered there was remedial English. You know, this business about things are getting worse all the time is just nonsense. It's based on no facts at all, except for the fact more kids are going to school than ever before, and that's why it's more costly.
Go ahead, please.
Good morning, Jack.
Morning.
Your friendly bus driver calling, sir.
Yeah.
On board my bus, when I see the children going to school, I take a look at the manners of the children.
Oh,
Hang on, Jack. I've got a question for him, too.
Go on, well, give us the question. Forget the...
Well, I see the private school kids acting much nicer with 10 times the homework, and I talk to them.
Okay. Private school children are better mannered, better dressed, and nicer little people than public school kids.
That's a possibility. I would imagine that a lot of the private school kids have got parents that are very, very interested in their own sort of personal, the personal upbringing of the kids.
My friendly bus driver has become a pain in the butt this morning. Go ahead, please.
Hello?
Yes.
My comment is directed at Mr. Rose, and that has to do with the amount of money spent per child on children in the BC education system.
1 point.
And he, along with an awful lot of other people that have a little pastime of going after the government, happen to be right out of line, because the Ontario government recently did a complete survey for their own information, because they were getting a lot of flack on what they were spending, and they found out that BC was the third highest, so he's full of hot air.
You're full of hot air.
Well, that's probably true, but that's beside the point. The point is that Ontario does spend more money on their kids than BC. And in terms of the percentage of the gross national product, we're among the last, if not the last.
Go ahead, please.
Hello?
That's you, sir.
Yeah, Mr. Rose, the problem I have is with the NDP. What's bothering me is this. We have been knocking what's been tried, what at least somebody's trying to do, to bring all the government costs in line with small business, of which I have a small business. We have to cut our costs. We have to try and keep going. Where I used to do $3,000 on a Saturday, I now do $2,500. Now, what I would like to know is, what is it that the NDP are intending to do to maintain an educational level which apparently hasn't been better, at least the students haven't reflected. In good times, the extra teachers that they had haven't reflected a better education. Now, No, don't wince. They haven't...
No, I'm just trying to remember. You've made about 6 points, and I got to note them, that's all.
When times were good, they had all kinds of teachers, apparently. Now what I want to know is, what are you intending to do with a reduced number of teachers, at least reduced costs, to improve the education? It's as simple as that. I want NDP's platform on this thing.
Well, I don't think that you've got time to hear everything that we're going, the whole platform. But I think
essential,
what we have to do is do something other than defend the status quo. I'll agree with you on that point. If there is some dissatisfaction out there, we've got to address it. First of all, I think we've got to bring back local autonomy. The fact that the costs skyrocketed. Do you remember 3 years ago we had double-digit inflation? And those settlements that Heinrich talked about yesterday of something like 17 or 18% were arbitrated settlements. They weren't locally negotiated.
That's why arbitration must go in
well,
times
what are you going to do then?
But matter of fact, the salary bill at UBC went up 20% following that North Island settlement.
I know.
It was an intolerable increase.
But it was settled by an arbitrary board, presumably independent. Pat Kinsella, sir, said yesterday in his little interview that the cost cutting and the restraint was merely to make Bennett look strong. It wasn't because there was about to be a tax revolt.
Well,
yes?
You and I
That's
will
what
know
he said.
They will have underestimated their income as usual. And we'll finish up with good news at the end of the year, won't they?
They will. And the quarterly report of Curtis the other day indicated that their income was far greater than they had anticipated. More local autonomy, because they can take care of local needs. Don't direct the whole thing by a czar in Victoria. That's what you got now.
Would you allow the local school boards to raise local taxes for frills on education?
What do you mean frills? Now that's an emotionally pejorative word. Now what are you going to be reading?
Do you want Vancouver with its big tax base to have a much more sophisticated and better system than Push could pay?
No, that's obviously not.
Well, that's one of the things
That's
you did.
one of the reasons they stole the industrial and commercial base away from the local. But
you
did
put
the money go into education?
You
didn't ask them that.
Would you put the industrial and commercial base back into local tax base for schools?
Yes.
You would. Take a break. Mark Rose, NDP. Coquitlam Moody. Got it right this time? Go ahead from Balfour, which is the other side of Vernon.
Of Nelson.
Nelson.
Yeah. I would like to hear some talk about the problems facing the rural schools. When the woman was on before from the Coquitlam School Board talking about the French immersion program being cut and Montessori program being cut, and I was wondering how she would be feeling about sending her kids to school where there's no gymnasium and no library, and we've got snow on the ground for 4 months of the year, and the only physical education program there is for the children is a cross-country ski program that's been supported by the parents and the community, and the only way that the school had access to a computer is also by community support, and we seem to be forgotten about out here, and I would like to know what's going to be done about that.
Oh, that's a great call, ma'am. Brings us back to reality. Do you hear that?
Yeah.
No gyms, community ski program. No computer, community support in the computer program.
It's the little red schoolhouse.
Right.
And this is nostalgia that everybody wants to go back to. If we could only
it isn't.
If we could only get back there, we would have well-disciplined, polite
Nobody's
children
talking about that.
And nice, lean teachers.
You're twisting it.
Of course, that's what you do all the time.
No, I mean, this is exactly the situation that we have.
No, I'm trying to address this thing seriously, if you'll let me get at it. There's some very serious problems in rural districts, especially where there's a declining enrollment. In the McWilliams riding, and he talked about this on the air, over near Nelson, or north of Nelson, they're about to lose 3 schools because of the inflexibility of the fiscal framework. And it's much more serious in small schools and rural schools because the framework is not adjustable and adaptable. Whenever you get a formula and you impose it on a whole province, you're bound to have anomalies. And this is one of the problems. Costs are higher per, it's not as efficient, it is not as productive, but costs are higher if you're dealing with smaller numbers. And I don't think the formula addresses that.
The NDP would give special aid to rural schools.
Look, Heinrich said yesterday that he's got what he didn't call it this, but it's what it is. It's a slush fund. Surrey got part of it. They had experienced a growth or anticipated a growth of 1,000 students. The formula provided a $1,000 shortfall on the costs. So they were faced with $1 million extra costs this September, merely because of that inflexible formula. They got extra money. They also got 2 so-called MLAs, which probably didn't hurt them at all. But places like Balfour and others that are facing severe problems because of this cutback. I can give you horror stories from all over the province, and it's not an isolated thing. And this is where I think the so-creds are vulnerable. People consider their kids important, and this is an attack on the kids.
Thanks, ma'am. At least you brought it home to me, because what Heinrich is supposed to do is to take some of that industrial commercial tax-based money and give it to you, and he's probably done you in the eye over it.
Well, what we have is an increasing school population, and there was a delegation sent from here to Victoria to see about getting a new school built to replace the little red schoolhouse and the 2 mobile trailers that we presently have. And that was just shortly before the Minister of Education came out with talking about not being pressured by...
That's right. If you're noisy, he won't listen to you.
Yeah, right.
Well, that's not true about you. I mean, you're noisy, and that's why people listen to you.
You're talking to me or the caller?
No, you.
Thank you, ma'am. From Victoria, go ahead, please.
Yes, I'd just like to make a couple of comments, and then I'll ask a question. All I like is a lot of these BC parents... Pardon?
Yes, carry on.
Go ahead.
I just like a lot of these BC parents. We lived in Ottawa for 3 years, and we've been back here a year, and to see the difference in the education system there for the children, there's just no comparison.
In what way, ma'am? Is it much worse in Ottawa?
Pardon?
Is it much worse in Ottawa?
Oh, it's fantastic back there. They've got... Pardon? I'm sorry, I can't hear you.
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
Oh, no, there's just the bus service for the kids, the French that they're taught, everything.
Music programs.
Pardon?
Fine arts programs.
Music and fine arts?
Anything. The schools they're just fantastic. I was so shocked when we came back here after being away for 3 years. And what I want to know is, what can parents do? It seems to me that this government is not answerable to anybody. They're riding roughshod. They're taking away everything, all the social services in this province, the money that's supposed to go to education. They're taking it, surely probably going to the BC Place and Expo and all this. And I want to know, what can we do? It's okay for Heinrich to say they're going to set up a commission. Is that supposed to shut everybody up?
Yes.
That's right.
I mean, it's about time, I think, the parents quit being so apathetic and got together and started making this government be answerable to them for something.
I think that you're dead on, because unless you've got an outraged public, this may sound self-serving, but I was making these noises a year ago, and nobody's listening.
Yeah.
But now they're listening, because it's beginning to hit them. But you've only had a third of it yet. Wait till you get the other 2/3.
Okay, ma'am. Ottawa, well, naturally, Ottawa has everything. They've got the government, they've got no unemployment, they've got prosperity, they don't know what the rest of the country is suffering.
It's a terrible place. I was there. That's why I had to get out.
No, it's an incestuous, self-centered, selfish place, isn't it?
Right. It's taken over by the Conservatives, too, which will change all
that. And they're no worse than the Liberals.
No.
Go ahead, please.
Hello. My son is in grade 4.
Right.
And he came home with a report card this week, and he is getting D's in reading. However, we were told that he's not bad enough to qualify for remedial reading because there just aren't enough remedial reading teachers. Now, to me, this is just a horrible state of affairs, because he's just going to continue to slip back and back and back if he doesn't get the help now. And I would like to hear your comments on this.
What school?
It's out in Surrey.
Surrey.
Well, I think that the lady has a right to be concerned, because reading is the key to future educational success. We're going to have fewer teacher aides. See, the first cutbacks, they took the CUPE workers out, the maintenance and the cleaning and all that, and they really went after them, and boards attempted to keep the teachers on. The next round will be getting rid of things, people like teachers' aides, remedial teachers, special class help, that sort of thing. And the only thing I can suggest to you, ma'am, is to make your voice known loud and clear that you want something better for your child. But I want to caution you, you can't, or not caution you, but at least advise you, if I may, that your local board can't do much about this.
Oh, I know. They told us this.
They have been told how much they can spend on education. I don't think that the board should have accepted that kind of appeasement a year ago or a year and a half ago. But anyway, they did, and they're stuck with it. Now, the ministry not only, you know, settles the total budget directly from Victoria, but it also has changed the rules. Boards originally were able to, you know, do the old shell game and put that money in different parts according to local priorities. They can't do it anymore. And if you don't believe me, ask Coquitlam.
So the message from Mark Rose is, as social credit continues to chop away at education and misuse federal funds, that we ain't seen nothing yet.
That's right.
Well, there is one more thing, too.
Yeah.
I'm a student at Douglas College myself, part-time. And over the past 5 years, my tuition has gone up 90%. Now, I can see that it's going to be going up further and further. I can't see where my husband and myself will ever be able to afford to give our children a university education.
Thank you, ma'am. It looks bleak at the moment. Next, I'm going to talk to 3 experts on a Community Leaders Conference on traffic safety after the break. Thank you, Mark Rose. The bad news is that in 1982 alone in British Columbia, which isn't that big a place, 2.5 million people, 387 men, women and children were killed and 7,000 people injured in accidents involving alcohol. It's almost unbelievable. And I have here a panel who are from the Community Leaders Conference on Traffic Safety. And first of all, I want to introduce Dr. Kimball Maull from Tennessee. And your specialty is what?
I'm a trauma surgeon. I take care of the injured patients when they arrive at the hospital.
And Dr. Herb Simpson, and your specialty is what?
Broad traffic safety issues.
For whom do you work?
Traffic Injury Research Foundation, a non-profit organization located in Ottawa.
Seatbelt expert.
Very much.
That kind of thing. And then, of course, we have Dr. Patricia Waller from?
The University of North Carolina Highway Safety Research Center.
Now, in North Carolina, have you recently changed the drinking age? Have you decided to do something about teenage kids by raising the drinking age?
After a great deal of controversy, the legislature raised the age for beer and wine from 18 to 19. Our age for hard liquor has always been 21.
So you've got 2 different laws for beer and wine
Right.
and hard liquor. That seems kind of crazy, doesn't it?
It doesn't make a bit of sense in terms of what's known, because there's just as much alcohol in a beer as there is in a cocktail, and all the evidence indicates that the majority of the drunk driving problem is associated with beer.
All of it. Most of it is all of it.
No, not all of it. Not all of it. The biggest portion of it.
Well, what has the federal government done? Does the federal government take any interest in traffic deaths due to drinking?
Very much so. There was a presidential commission on drunk driving that came out with a good many recommendations, one of which was that the state should raise the drinking age for all alcoholic beverages to 21. Initially, the federal government maintained very strongly that it was a state responsibility to do that, but more and more public pressure was brought to bear, and then they decided that maybe it really was a federal responsibility.
But you won't have you won't have a drinking age of 21 until something else happens.
Right. There are a good many states that still don't have 21, but the federal government has said you've got 2 years to raise it to 21, and if you don't, you're going to lose an awful lot of highway funds. And that gets into big bucks when you can't build your roads.
Let's talk about drinking ages in Canada. In British Columbia, you can drink any booze you like legally at the age of 19.
Right.
Do you have feelings on this?
Well, the drinking age in Canada is 18 or 19, depending on the province you're in. And right now, there are a lot of provinces that are looking seriously at whether to raise it. And what they're doing really is waiting to find out what the experience has been in the United States, where several jurisdictions have raised it. I think what we're realizing is that if the drinking age is raised, there will probably be an effect. It will have some effect on the traffic toll, but it'll probably be a lot smaller than we expect, and it'll probably be short-lived. That is, the reasons that young people drink are far more than just the law. In other words, there's a lot of social conditions, a lot of things that we do that culturally determine when we drink, not just the age that we say they can drink at.
Has your experience in trauma given you an opinion on the drinking age for youngsters?
Well, in Tennessee, we've just recently raised the drinking age for all liquor to 21. But I think one has to be aware that when you raise the drinking age, you're attacking the problem of the youthful drinker and driver. But you're also being unfair to the individuals who wish to drink at age 19, let's say, and do not drive at the same time.
Well, it's the old story that if you're 18, you can die for your country, but you can't go into a pub in uniform and have a drink.
That's true.
That is a very telling argument, as a matter of fact. So you're inclined to feel it's a bit autocratic and arrogant to put a blanket 21.
It is. It's hard to speak out against it because it probably will be effective in saving lives, but at the same time, it does infringe on some of the rights of many people under the age of 21.
This can give me liberty or give me death if I drink when I have my liberty, right? Now, what about the driving age? Here we have 16. And it's very difficult for parents to refuse permission if the kid can raise the money for a car to let him drive at 16. How is it in your part of the world?
Most states, the age is 16, and not only do the parents not object, they're usually relieved to get out of the chauffeuring. It's a relief not to have to drive.
So there's no
everywhere.
thoughts in you two gentlemen that the 16 age is wrong, is there?
I think the 16 age is right. But what I think we do is we put unfair expectations on the young driver when they pass some minimal requirements, and then we put them out on the highways and really say to them, we know you're going to make mistakes and you're going to suffer the consequence. I think we should be looking at a system of, say, graduated licensing where the person starts with a set of restrictions on their permit, and then these restrictions are gradually relaxed. So the person has a systematic, stepwise introduction to full licensing privileges.
That sounds sensible, doesn't it?
It makes sense. In Tennessee, the driving age is 15 with a permit, and you have to drive during the daytime and with a parent for the first 8 months that you're able to drive. And then for the last 4 months before you reach your 16th birthday, you have a little bit less limited privileges, more limited privileges.
50, maybe they grow up quicker in Tennessee.
Well, I don't think that's true.
Now, what about this drinking and driving business? What about the breathalyzers? What about the blood tests? We have a procedure now whereby you can be, a blood test can be demanded of you in certain circumstances. That's surely good, and surely everybody on the continent does that now. We'll start with you, Pat.
I think it's good, but no, not everybody does it. I don't know of any state that by law requires the blood test unless the person is placed under arrest for drunk driving. But Dr. Maull has some extremely interesting information on that.
We at the University of Tennessee have a compulsory requirement for any injured patient, regardless of whether it's a motor vehicle accident victim or not, has to have a blood alcohol test drawn. And before moving to Tennessee, we studied over a 3-year period drivers who had significantly elevated blood alcohol levels, who were injured seriously enough to be hospitalized. And over 3 years, we had 56 such individuals who had an average blood alcohol concentration of 0.24.
Oh my God.
Very, very high.
You could barely stand up with that, the normal person.
They represented a problem drinking population for sure. And of these 56 drivers, none were convicted of driving under the influence of alcohol.
The evidence was there.
Well, the evidence was there in the hospital, but unfortunately it cannot be used in a court of law, and this is a major handicap to getting at this problem.
56 of them walked away. How do we stand?
Well, I think that it's been well known for some time the best way to avoid any problems in terms of drinking and driving if you've been involved in an accident is to demand to be taken to the hospital. Because by the time the police can do anything in terms of taking a breathalyzer or getting any evidence from you, of course, several hours have passed and evidence of impairment has dissipated. Right now, there is an amendment to the criminal code that is being considered, which will permit the drawing of blood specimens. And I think that it's a good step in that respect. It's not going to make the drinking driving problem go away. It's going to make it a little easier to identify some of the problem cases. It's going to make it a little easier in terms of prosecution.
Well, let's turn to another aspect of it. What is going to make it go away? Are draconian punishments the way? Lifetime suspensions, jailed for life, never drive again, you know, all this kind of thing. Pat?
I think that this is a very popular response to the problem, but let me give you an example in North Carolina. The U.S. ranks third internationally after the USSR and South Africa in the proportion of our population that's in prison. North Carolina ranks fourth among the states, so we may be higher than South Africa, I don't know. We have 17,000 people in prison, and we're under pressure from the federal government about the conditions of our prisons. Each year, we arrest almost 100,000 people for drunk driving. I think that jail sentences for drunk drivers are not a realistic solution. The other problem with it is there is absolutely no evidence to show that it works, that it decreases the probability of either that person driving drunk or anyone else driving drunk.
I'm going to go to the phones on this, but I also want to try and get from my very illuminating panel if there's any way to tackle the damn problem. After the break. Before I get back to my panel, more bad news for Munro and the IWA. Gruntman, his enemy, just won the key position of first Vice President of the BC Fed. Don't know what Munro will do now. However, enough of that. I was going to ask you, is there any way, panel members, please, where anybody in the world has successfully, appears to be beating the drunk driving problem?
Well, one of the things that has been effective in other countries is increasing the likelihood of apprehension and punishment. Not the severity of punishment, but increasing the perception among the population, the drinking population, that they will be caught and that they will be punished.
Anything to add?
Yes, I think that we have tended to rely on laws, legislations, and regulations, and we realize the conditions that give rise to drinking and driving are pretty complex. I mean, we're a society of drivers and a society of drinkers.
You think a society of drunks, you would almost think.
And a society of drinking drivers. So I think we have to start addressing the way in which individuals can make significant changes to the problem, not just the way in which government can force us into doing what they think is right.
Yeah.
We have to take some responsibility.
Or maybe we should just say, well, we're going to have 400 people killed every year in BC. Forget it.
No.
Well, either that, either accept that. In other words, society says we're prepared to accept that, or if society says we won't tolerate that, then we've got to be prepared as a society to deal with the problem.
Go ahead from Williams Lake.
Morning. A couple of years ago, I got picked up for impaired and refusing a breathalyzer. I got fined for both. And my question is, I got 20 points, not just 10 for impaired, but I got 10 for refusing a breathalyzer.
So you should.
Well, why?
What's your quibble?
The thing is, okay, I can understand getting the 10 points for impaired.
Oh, you're on a technical ICBC question. I think that's a silly question. Besides, you deserved it. You were impaired, don't forget.
All right, I admitted to being impaired, too.
Good enough. No more time for you this morning. She wants a local technical answer about point systems. Do you have point systems?
Mm-hmm.
And do you lift the license after a number of points?
Yes.
We've got big holes in ours where people can drive with myriad points, you know. Go ahead, please.
Oh.
Yes.
Yeah, you're just discussing draconian methods for dealing with drunk drivers. I was listening to a radio program yesterday in town here, and they were saying that in Sweden, they have really strict drunk driving
laws,
and they have half their jails full of drunk drivers now. It's a problem. They can't even deal with it anymore.
That's what Pat Waller was telling me just now. Are you aware of the Swedish experiment?
Well, I understand it's about a third of the people in jail are serving drunk driving related offenses. They've had to build special detention units to house the people. And in fact, many people serve their punishment in hotels on the weekends because they can't put them in. That makes a mockery out of the law.
Listen, don't talk about Swedish mockeries. I know a guy who used to go in his Rolls Royce and park it at Ocala on the Friday night, late, half hammered. Go in Saturday, come out Sunday, his Rolls Royce still there, and he'd done 3 days of his sentence. And if you went in half hammered to the jail, you spent a nice supper every weekend. I'm sure that happens in Tennessee too, if you have weekend sentences. Go ahead, please.
Yes, Mr. Webster. I'm 19 years old, and I don't think it's going to do a heck of a lot of good to raise the drinking age up to 21. What they should do is, realistically, raise the driving age to 19, because it's so easy for kids to get alcohol at any age. I was drinking when I was 15, and if my mother had allowed me to get my driver's license, I don't think I'd be alive today.
What do you make of that point?
I don't agree with that. I understand the lady's concern. I think probably that the best thing to do under those circumstances is to look at lowering the level of legal blood alcohol for youthful drivers, so that the youthful driver recognizes two things. And hopefully it would result in a change in her behavior. That is, if she has any alcohol on board, that she will be subject to having her license lifted and subject to other penalties. And secondly, that hopefully will result in what has happened in a positive way in Sweden, and that is as if the individual is going to go to a party, for example, where there is alcohol being served, that they will designate one member of their group to totally abstain and be responsible for getting everybody back home again.
Go ahead, please. Hello.
Hello.
That's you, ma'am.
Oh, yes. I'm just wondering. I know that Mr. Webster is probably going to call me stupid and cut me off, but I'm wondering, wouldn't it be a lot easier if you were to install a machine, and when you turn on the ignition, you also sort of have to breathe into a small tube, and if your alcohol level in your breath, is above the legal limit, then possibly they won't start up the car.
Perfectly good question, ma'am. You're not stupid, and I respect and admire your presentation.
There is some work that's been done on that sort of thing. To use just a machine that's put into any car does not seem to be feasible because there's so much variation in the way people respond to these things even when they're sober. There has been some interesting pilot work in California where they provided special cars with a special piece of equipment in it for the convicted drunk driver. The driver had to have been convicted twice, and this was the only car that the driver could use, and the equipment had been calibrated to that individual driver. If he could not perform properly, it did not pick up alcohol in the breath, but rather performance, tracking performance.
I'm also wondering, there's something about scope in the breathalyzer when you take that breath test. If you have scope in your breath, then it sometimes registers. I'm also wondering if that is true, if that proves true in the blood test. I'll hang up now and listen.
Right. On the breathalyzer test, they're supposed to wait 20 minutes without drinking anything, taking anything in before the test is run to get rid of that sort of a problem.
So a defense many a time, I'm sure has been, I just washed my mouth out with scope. Eh?
Right, but if you wait 20 minutes, the scope should no longer make that big a difference, and they'll only be getting the breath. I will say quickly, on the attachment to the car, the driver still can drive it in an emergency, but if he goes over, the lights will flash, and if he goes over 10 miles an hour, the horn will blow.
Well, gentlemen and madame, I'm grateful for your presence here this morning, and needless to say, everybody wishes you well. This should be a useful conference, I suppose. It's today and tomorrow, is it?
Yesterday and today.
Yesterday and today. My thanks to, let me get the names right, Dr. Kimball Maull, M-A-U-L-L. Specific place you come from is?
University of Tennessee in Knoxville.
Knoxville. How about, quick tuning. And the Canadian Dr. Herb Simpson from Ottawa. And the delightful Patricia Waller from the University of North Carolina. Say the word thing again.
Thing.
My thanks. Thank you very much.
Thank
Best
you.
of luck. And don't drink and drive. Do what I did. Stop drinking. I'll be back after the break. In the late spring of '84, a strange thing happened on the world's news fronts. In London, Paris, New York, Tokyo, Central America, the Middle East, and in Canada, or whatever, 100 of the world's foremost photojournalists, the world-weary, khaki-clad lensmen of the press, packed their cameras in canvas shoulder bags and boarded planes. Pick up the story from there, David Cohen, author of the book, A Day in the Life of Canada.
Well, what we wanted to do was try to find the 100 best photojournalists in the world and from Canada, bring them all to Toronto in one day, brief them, get them psyched up, have a workshop with children. Kodak gave out cameras to everybody, fly them all over the country, and have them all take pictures on one day.
And this is the result of it as far as Canada is concerned.
A Day in the Life of Canada.
And here we have a little pre-produced piece from A Day in the Life of Canada. Now, 3, 2...
And we make a book
about the people in Australia. And now we make a book about the people in Canada. Ah. Okay?
Yeah, we're taking goddamn pictures, won't it?
Okay.
Okay.
It's dawn on the morning of Friday, June 8th, 1984. 100 photographers from around the world have come to Canada faced with one of the most difficult assignments of their careers. In the next 24 hours, they must capture Canadian life in the passing of one short day. From dawn to dusk, from one end of the continent to the other, their mission is to try to make a significant document of the world's second largest country. From Newfoundland to the Yukon, from Toronto to the prairies of Saskatchewan, 100 photographers are beginning a race against time to compile a visual time capsule of life as it was lived on a typical, ordinary day.
Was the documentary, part of which we have seen, shot the same day, or more or less the same day, that the pictures were taken?
Yeah, we had no idea until about a day before that we could get it together to do the documentary. But you know, we figured if you get 100 photographers, these guys all in the same place, it was pretty rare, so we should get some footage of it. And from the time we got the go-ahead to do the documentary until the time it was in the can, I think it was 60 hours altogether, 65 hours.
In how many countries have you now done a photographic day in the life of?
We started in Australia, and it was never supposed to be a series. It was supposed to be a one-off crazy project to bring all these photographers down, our friends really, because you know, Rick's my partner, Rick Smolin, and I both came from that community, the photojournalistic community, to bring all of our friends down to Australia and try to do something special. And it was very successful, but it took years and years to put together, and it lost money, and it was crazy. We never wanted to hear the words day in the life of anything again. But I think we got addicted to the adrenaline of the whole thing and the big circus and the craziness. It's a lot of fun to do.
It was your idea? You're your partner?
Yeah, Rick. Yeah.
You're paparazzi yourself, are you?
I wouldn't call it paparazzi.
Paparazzi is it? It's not paparazzi. But it's how much the book cost?
$39.95.
How many did you? How many other issues have you done already, or is this the second one?
This is the third one. We did Day in Life of Australia, Day in Life of Hawaii, and then this is Day in Life of Canada. And this is the best of them by far. We're getting, you know, I think we hit our stride finally. We got it down.
That's fantastic. Your favorite picture in the book? I see some. I think you have better pictures in the book than you showed in that little clip.
I'll show you my favorite picture in the book. See, one of the things is we had some trouble raising funds to do this in Canada. So all the photographers had to stay in people's houses instead of hotels. But it really turned out well because we got some very personal pictures of people in the morning, you know, putting on their makeup, shaving. Here's a guy here, ironing. Well,
let's take our time and find it. No big rush.
This is my favorite picture.
Oh, he was in the thing there. You saw him, didn't you? We'll do it. Two. Two it is. That's that two. That's two. He's a grubby looking character, isn't he?
He works for the Bank of Canada, actually.
It's a big noise. Is he going to sue me? A grubby looking fellow who works for the Bank of Canada. But then, having taken the pictures in one day, honest, no kidding, cross your heart and hope to die?
24 hours, those are the rules. We played by the rules.
Ah, but you had people up in the Arctic.
Oh yeah, you had to get them. They had to leave 3 days before to get there. But
they all shot on the one day.
Yeah, on the stroke of midnight, they went out and shoot. We told the photographers, look, insinuate yourself into people's lives, find out what Canada's about, and make extraordinary pictures of ordinary events.
It's simple.
I think that's what they did.
Yeah, I want to tell my photographer that. Insinuate yourself into people's lives, and go out today and make extraordinary pictures.
Yeah, but that's what these guys get paid for.
Oh, how much did you pay them?
They got $500 a piece for the day.
And no further reproduction rights of any kind?
Yeah, but
complicated formula.
Yeah.
So how many will you sell in Canada of that if it goes big?
Oh, if it goes big, this should be a #1 best-selling book in Canada by next week.
So, not that it's funny.
And it's running out, too. So
not that it's funny, but I mean, people buy that and don't look at the pictures. You know that.
I hope they do.
They buy it and they put it on the coffee table.
No, this is a book. You know who really likes this book?
No, who likes this book?
Children. Children will go through this book and will spend hours just looking at the pictures, and that's nice.
It's only old people like me that get books like this and put them on the coffee table.
It's not for cynical people.
No. What do you mean? You're not suggesting I'm cynical, do you?
Not you. No.
And here are you, a Yankee.
Well, you're a Scotsman.
I'm not Scotsman, I'm a Canadian.
Okay.
You're a Yankee. You have the gall to come into this country and do a day in the life of my country and make a fortune and walk away.
I hope I make a fortune. It hasn't showed that indication thus far.
No, it's a terrific book. David what? Cohen?
Yeah.
Was your father in the newspaper business?
No. My father was in the furniture business.
Furniture business.
My grandparents actually originally emigrated to Canada.
And they couldn't stand the weather and went south. You were lucky, especially if they came from Winnipeg.
This is a beautiful city, though.
This is the most beautiful city in North America, you silly fool. Didn't you know that before?
I tend to agree. I come from a really ugly city.
This makes San Francisco look shabby.
At first glance, I tend to agree.
Besides, we have an almost totally heterosexual population. It's a much more comfortable. Ruben, I've told you to stop laughing on the floor of the show. David, thanks very much.
Nice to
Just sit there. I've got a few minutes to fill.
All right.
And I can always pull your leg if nothing else happens.
All right.
Okay? David Cohen, A Day in the Life of Our Canada. Done by another of his arrogant, bombastic Yanks. God bless him, because if he hadn't done it, nobody would have done it.
That's right.
After the break. Stay there. I'll do the whole bit and come back and say goodbye. There's a call for you here, David.
Personal?
I don't know. Are you married, single, common law, separated, or divorced?
I'm single.
You're single. Give my advice.
I'm not from San Francisco.
Good ad lib. Go ahead, please, to David Cohen.
Good morning, Mr. Webster.
Morning, ma'am.
I just want to compliment your guest. My picture's in his book.
Oh. If we promised you a free book, they've just come in, and you'll get it within a week.
Oh, I'm on page 199.
Okay, just hold on, please.
Yep.
Page 199. Now I'll decide whether or not it's suitable for public display.
Shame the Johns.
What?
I was one of the ones that was patrolling for Shame the Johns.
Ah, yeah, there you are.
Oh, I'll show you a picture right now.
It's right in the corner there.
It's this one here.
Yeah, that's it.
Come on, come on, come on. Is that your picture?
No, that's not it.
That's not your picture.
Oh, stop it.
She's on the other side of the page.
Women's protesting prostitution.
Come in closer.
As she should be.
Shame the Johns. Oh, I'm sorry. I
One of the
lied
ones holding the big placard, Shame the Johns.
I've got you. I thought for a moment you were the one who was adjusting her deshabille in the dressing room.
No.
No.
I was on TV as well.
You're not the stripper. You're on Shame the Johns. Thank you very much
Thanks for calling.
Look, the camera's over here.
Oh, sorry.
That's a speaker.
I just put books together, you know?
Go ahead, please. Hello there.
Hello, Jack.
Oh, just a minute. I've got to speak to, what do we call him? His worship. This is his worship. Genuflect.
Hi, Jack.
Good morning, your worship.
Good morning. I just thought you might want to take on the second one. I mean, the Vancouver's the second most beautiful city, and of course ours the best. And it's not actually in the book, but I am buying the book.
Goodbye. That's the mayor of
Nice book.
a celebrated ski town here called Whistler, British Columbia.
Good decision.
It's a suburb of Vancouver. Go ahead, please.
Hello, Jack.
Yeah, you go. Yes, please.
Yeah, I'd just like to say that I got Mr. Cohen's first book, A Day in the Life of Australia. It's the only souvenir I brought back after a year in the country, and I'm glad I did get something. I thought it was an excellent book.
Thank you. Now I have a little serious piece of business to do, so just sit to the side and keep your visage solemn. How much time have I got, Fred? How much time have I got? I'm asking you on there.
1 minute and 10 seconds. 1 minute, 10 seconds.
A couple had an accident with an RCMP car, and we reported it to you on November the 3rd, Murray and Shirley Sidden of Burnaby. And they were told by the insurance claims office at ICBC that regardless of the fact that the Mountie had caused it, it would be their fault and they would have great difficulty in getting settlement. They were not to blame. I announced at the time, on November the 3rd or thereabouts, that I would do a weekly report to see if we could hurry up the authorities to get this claim settled by the RCMP and the Justice Department within a matter of a short time, instead of the traditional, lengthy, bureaucratic manner of 3 months, 6 months to a year. I'm happy to tell you that the RCMP did a very quick investigation. And yesterday, a chief superintendent told my man Schneider, we do agree that the Siddons were not at fault. Schneider said, does this mean the RCMP was at fault? Not exactly, said the Mountie. We never admit liability, but we make an offer of a settlement. I want to compliment the RCMP on settling this case in no time flat instead of the normal 6 to 8 to 10 months. I hope they keep it up. God bless the Mounties. Everyone should back them up except when they're in traffic accidents, and I'll be back after the break. Ian MacDonald, who is Mulroney's biographer and paints just a perfect picture of Mulroney. Maybe he is perfect. We'll find out any foibles he has Monday at 9 a.m. precisely.
Reagan has said 11 times since 1968 he believes we are the last generation before Armageddon. The men in the missile silos put their keys in the locks ready to turn them to launch the missiles like in the day after. 3 squadrons of B-52s took off heading towards Russia. At the 7th minute they had to notify the president, but they couldn't find him. We were 13 minutes from nuclear war. November 79. We're about to destroy Mozart, Beethoven, Brahms, Handel, Picasso, Renoir, Shakespeare, Dickens, Mayan civilization, Egyptian civilization. What on earth are you talking about, sir? The Pentagon's definition of winning a nuclear war is at the end of the nuclear war, America ends up with more nuclear weapons than Russia's got, so she can prepare immediately to fight World War IV. You're not making enough noise in this country. If you want your children to grow up, you'll be screaming at the top of your lungs.
An NDP view of the education crisis on Check at Midnight. An NDP view of BC's education crisis on Check at Midnight.